Hey everyone, this is Soul with a message, or more like a lesson to Blizzard on what exactly their test plan for WoW Shadowlands should be, because I know what's wrong with the process and I know how to do it best. I'm an expert. No, I'm not. In all seriousness though, World of Warcraft Shadowlands will be available for testing, which entails many things, including people like me showing you stuff and explaining features as if we know what we're talking about. Wowhead is going to unleash boatloads of art assets and broadcast text, and we're going to dissect and break them down, speculate and spoil every little detail months ahead of time. Meanwhile, Blizzard will speak to us directly as little as possible. Let what's been data mined speak for them, but only speak up when the most controversial of things comes up, like disabling water walking or something. Personally, I have problems with the way that Blizzard does their alpha and beta testing. But rather than bloviate, rather than make some attempt to use my years of QA testing experience as a soapbox to stand on, I'm gonna just come to you as a fan and share my vision of what an effective WoW expansion test cycle phase thing could feel like. So this is headcanon. This is fan fiction. I have no doubt that in many points, numerous points in this presentation, you'll point out,
Well, so they can't realistically do that, and here are all the practical and technical and obvious reasons why.
yeah, I know. But maybe what I have to say today might inspire some improvement, some change, some inspiration that'll make the development better, because that would make this effort pay off. Let's begin by introducing this term, compartmentalization. Google defines this word as the division of something into sections or categories. In the case of developing a WoW expansion though, I'm talking about separating all of the major features into individual test phases. So while the WoW team is working on whatever the heck in the background, they're going to throw pieces of the expansion our way for us to look at thoroughly. Basically, I'm talking about focused testing. So let's go over a hypothetical Shadowlands testing phase. I think the first thing that should be available for us to test ought to be Exile's Reach, the new starting zone that will take us through levels 1 through 10. This will give us a chance to check out the new 1 through 10 experience, as well as give us a taste of how the level squish is going to feel. And that's really it for this early test phase, just something fresh for us to sink our teeth into. The next thing would be to open up the pre-Shadowlands experience, levels 10 through 50. Notice that we're still not testing anything necessarily new, just level squish, and its effects across all the previous expansions. Obviously, this isn't as flashy as revealing gigabytes of new art assets and character models, but there's so much more to it than that. The 10 through 50 experience is going to need a lot of feedback, because throughout this test phase, we're going to see how class abilities are going to be unpruned. There's a lot to be revealed, so we're going to start talking about what happens to a level 96 character after the pre-patch. We're going to understand how chromie time feels, and just what are we getting with every level. What does a level 20 Demon Hunter feel like, or a level 10 character in Battle for Azeroth content? How will our characters feel in 9.0? These are all huge questions that don't have clear answers, and there are plenty more questions to ask. And when it comes to this unpruning, there's plenty of room for discussion and bitching. The way I see it, these two phases of pre-Shadowlands testing can be completely open for everyone to romp in, make it as accessible as the PTR is right now. After all, nothing new is being revealed or spoiled, but since this is what the class revamp will so far amount to, it's going to be extremely helpful to let players check things out throughout development so they can let Blizzard know how classes feel as they grow and how they feel at level 50 just before walking into Shadowlands. There's no doubt that we're going to see a bunch of threads on MMO Champion.
OMG, Blizzard isn't testing the Shadowlands zones because they're so far behind, lol.
Whatever. Just don't give in to the pressure, alright? They're just forum people. They're just streamers or content creators. Blah. So levels 1 through 50. Let it be an open alpha and beta. Let character transfers be a thing, and allow the players to just go wild. to see how the squish and the changes will affect older items, raids, dungeons, and etceteras. Moving on with this idea of compartmentalized testing, these next phases ought to be a bit more traditional, more like a closed beta test, with a mindfulness to give invites to those who are mostly interested in testing. In this phase, we should be moving on to testing covenants, more specifically covenants and soulbinds and conduits. In the past, Blizzard has kind of slow dripped the alpha and the beta by opening zones for people to jump in and frolic in like,
Ooh, wow, so pretty. Look at all the cool environments and models and placeholder armor and gaping holes in the world.
don't do that anymore, please. Save that for way later in the beta when you just want to let as many people in as possible. In the meantime, treat us like testers, not tourists. Because the level 50 to 60 Shadowlands experience is just what? Questing? In our very first romp in the Shadowlands, we're not going to have covenants or any of that stuff to really check out. Asking us to give feedback on things like leveling speed and quest flow? In my opinion, those are just small potatoes. It contributes to the short-term enjoyment of leveling, but not the long-term viability of an expansion. Covenants aren't really part of the 50 through 60 experience. That starts at endgame, or, well, later on it's going to be Altgame Plus. For the purpose of getting feedback on what Ian described as Shadowlands' biggest feature,
Covenants are also really the #1 major feature of Shadowlands.
it would be a really big mistake to make us wait as each zone is unlocked throughout the testing process and, we get a few levels here, a few levels there. It would be months into the beta before we got to test the expansion's major feature. Why wait? To test Covenants, all testers are going to need is the ability to make a max level character and have a sandbox environment where we can instantly choose a Covenant with soulbinds by talking to an NPC, and then a vendor to give us conduits to mess with and slot into these soulbind thingamajiggers. We still don't need to go to the Shadowlands zones themselves for this. This sort of testing can be done for the comforts of our capital cities, complete with places to duel and target dummies at the ready. What should come before any of this testing begins, though, ought to be a developer blog from the WoW team where they discuss the functionality of covenants and soulbinds and conduits at a high level, because it's a big system, right? To break down what we know about covenants at the moment, they include the 4 covenant-specific abilities, the 48 abilities that are possible depending on your class and covenant choice, the soulbind trees, and based on this screenshot, there are going to be 12 of those, and then there is the unknown number of conduits, these glyph-like enhancements that you can apply to these soulbinds. I really think they should let us play with a fully unlocked tree right away, and give us access to conduits as they're being developed so we can give some regular feedback. But they should also explain what the pacing is going to be like how soulbinds and conduits are going to develop well after launch, and more. But let's move on to another separate test phase, Torghast. Torghast should be its own sandbox server as well, with, pre-made max level characters, pre-assigned with a covenant, with basic conduits, and then spawn us outside of the mod just outside of Torghast, but not before sharing with us what their plans are. Once the testing begins, I want them on a blog of some sort, talking about their current vision. I want to hear them talk about how often can we go into Torghast. Is it time gated? Is there a lockout of sorts? And then open it up for some conversation. I'm already on board with letting us run this Torghast thing as much as we want, but I still want to hear what they have planned. I might be convinced. And it's not exactly the jailer's identity being spoiled here. Torghast is a different gameplay mode in the World of Warcraft, and it's endgame content, meant to last the entire expansion, so testing its basic functionality should probably come first. Just scale our item level to whatever they want, and then see how far we get. Show us the different anima bonuses that are meant to help us climb higher, and drop hints on other bonuses you have planned that aren't ready for testing yet. That way we can give feedback on which synergies are too weak or too strong, which scale too well with item level. How much harder is Torghast for a given class, a role, a certain group comp, or a group size. And separately, fill us in on how legendary crafting is going to work. Tell us about runes, the legendaries, and how that's going to compel us to keep farming this tower. At some point, of course, the Shadowlands zones are going to be available for testing. We'll finally get to see the new art, the environment, the models, the gear, and so on. Introduce this phase of testing not unlike a BlizzCon panel, a presentation of each zone while giving us some of the context of what we're doing in the area. Maybe have a few developers do some questing, give us footage with commentary, show and tell. That's it. I guess another idea, because I guess sometimes Blizzard likes blowing money, would be to have one of those media summits like they did with patch 8.2. Invite guests over for a day of playtesting and Q&A with the devs and some more stuff, and then start sending beta invites the way that they usually do, with the streamers and content creators to generate what I guess is supposed to be hype and exposure. The rest of the testing would pretty much fall into place. The beta would start with a big character wipe, and then we finally get to test out this whole 50 to 60 pacing and flow. Test out Alt Game Plus, the Covenant campaign, rebuilding the Sanctum, and all that other stuff that ties things together. Well, let's go back to talking about the alpha. That is, testing Covenants and Torghast, whether that should be treated like previous alphas, which could be streamed and data mined and published, or if they should be closed tests with signed non-disclosure agreements. It's a debate worth having because being able to look into what's under development is a double-edged sword. For the longest time, WoW has been under a microscope. Wowhead can tell you the second a build is coming before it's even able to be downloaded. Theory crafters will take intricate systems full of so-called choices and tell you what the right choice is. Content creators like me will put on their best O face when showing you this brand new thing, and we'll have no idea what we're talking about.
So from the looks of it, any of these followers will be able to be assigned or deployed with you and join you in combat. As you saw, he just kind of died there.
What's dangerous about revealing endgame systems while in development is that it'll contaminate the hype. Like it or not, coverage of in-development content in the World of Warcraft, it leaves an impression on viewers who will form opinions based on very little information, and given that Blizzard as a whole has been burning through some of its good faith these days, that opinion is likely to be extremely unfavorable. For example, the Covenant system might appear to be extremely flawed or broken at first, but it could turn out to be awesome at launch. Before that though, how many videos and threads will be published trashing this early version? How many fans are going to tune out because of this whole roller coaster of emotion that is game development? On the other hand, even with closed testing and NDAs, this is still the World of Warcraft, a game with arguably the most robust coverage of any MMO in the genre's history. Wowhead might be pressured to not cover the closed alpha, but are we ready to discuss Shadowlands Alpha coverage from 4chan links and unknown fringe YouTubers like Sol Sobre Ezi? Speaking for me, I would get behind separating open and closed testing as long as Blizzard isn't so silent to the public about endgame development. I don't think it's a huge loss to the endgame experience to give a little bit of a dev blog on how things are progressing, like milestones, obstacles, and other news. But let's wrap things up. If Blizzard does go through with their usual testing model, we're going to drop into the first Shadowlands zone and have very few things to check out other than the Covenant ability that we get while leveling in each zone, and our unpruned classes at level 50, if that. And that's it. The main takeaway here is that I just want them to give us endgame systems to test first, and then communication, and most importantly, communication. Throwing us into an open field without any major features to test isn't making good use of us as a test pool. In fact, it threatens to repeat history. Notice how players are almost universally happy with the art and world building of Battle for Azeroth and previous expansions, but everything else is kind of a mixed bag. I know there are innumerable reasons why this sort of testing isn't going to happen, but I think it's important to get this off my chest and share what I think on what would help Shadowlands be more successful. Because I think the features that are coming are super cool. I'm just worried that they won't get into our hands until it's too late. But let me know what your thoughts are, share them in a comment below, whether you're hopeful, cynical, or realistic, which is just another word for cynical. Like the video if I got you thinking, and subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. We'll see you later. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.